Time once again for the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. We cover a lot. L'Jarius Sneed has the franchise tag, but the Chiefs are talking about trading him. Where does he ultimately land? Optimism seems to be growing about Chris Jones re-signing with the Kansas City Chiefs. What are the chances that happens? Should they want him back? What does the defense look like? If one or both of these players are gone, MVS, the MVS era is over in Kansas City. What do we make of it when it's all said and done? T. Higgins, Pittman, Evans, all off the board. So what does the wide receiver position look like in free agency now? Do the Chiefs need to take a left tackle out of this draft, or can they look elsewhere? Governor Parsons, Missouri Governor Mike Parsons, commuting the sentence of Britt Reid, getting quite a reaction from the fan base. We break it all down right here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis. Back at it as free agency, getting ready to fire the starter's gun on that, get everything rolling there. And the combine is done. Now I've got all the numbers, all the digits we need to start making the informed choices for how teams should be built here in the NFL. Jeff, let's start though on the free agent side, as we now have basically what the Chiefs are going to do. They put the franchise tag on L'Jarius Sneed, 2 first-round picks. If you want to just take him off the Chiefs' hands, I don't think any of us feel like that's going to happen. But they've given him permission to seek a trade, so he can get out there and look and see. His agent can be trying to figure out what kind of deals are out there for him. What's the value, and what do you think ultimately happens in this situation with L'Jarius Sneed?
Well, the value is not 2 first-round picks, as you said, but they would be a third-round compensation if he left in free agency on his own. So you have to assume a second-round pick's got to be in play here. Maybe a lower-round pick if you really want to spice it up, but it makes sense. The move is smart for a number of reasons. One, obviously, it's a more cost-effective franchise tag to work on, so you can play around with the money. You can go sign other players. You got some options there. 2, I think he does have value on the open market. You look at teams like Houston, who's going to be looking for a cornerback. Detroit is going to be looking for a cornerback. Chicago with Ryan Poles, who used to work with the Chiefs, they have a need at cornerback. So there's going to be a need there. He played at a super high level. I don't think that of all the options on the table, long-term extension, trade, 1-year franchise tag, I think the one that does not happen is a long-term extension. I think he's either traded or he's playing on the franchise tag.
Yeah, the franchise tag takes up a lot of room, Eric. If that is the route you go, he counts $20 million against the spot. What's your gut tell you about how this one's playing out?
Yeah, the one team I think to keep an eye on is Arizona, because the Cardinals have 13 picks in this draft, including 4 and 27 and 35. So there's some sort of, like, I know Chiefs fans are kind of mad when you bring up the truth, which is that he's not going to be he's not going for the 15th pick. So there's like, but they could do some sort of swap maybe where the Chiefs get 27 and the Cardinals get back like a 2 and like something like that to get Sneed. But the Cardinals are a team where they have 13 picks. We saw it with Miami this week. Miami had to let Christian Wilkins go because when they did their, or not let him go, but he's going to hit free agency, because when they were doing their rebuild, they had too many young players all enter the team at one time, and they got good. And then they bought into the Bradley Chubbs and the Tyreek Hills. And now once these guys are up for contract extensions, there's not enough money. And so like the Cardinals, who I think are pretty, like I think Monty Austin-Ford has a clue. I think that Jonathan Gannon is pretty sharp. I think the Cardinals, they go Marvin Harrison at 4, or, we talked to somebody really, really plugged in, it might not be Marvin Harrison, but if they go with like a key cornerstone wide receiver at 4, Kyler Murray's on a veteran contract. They probably need to get veteran players into that group, much like Chicago did last year with DJ Moore and Montez Sweat. I think the Cardinals are an underrated destination possibly for Sneed.
Yeah. I like the idea of stocking picks, right? I mean, Brett Veach had his best draft 2 years ago when he had started the draft with 12 picks, finished it with 10, maneuvered around. I brought up the fact that, Najee Johnson hasn't performed, although there was good vibes coming from him in training camp before he got hurt. But I can't even look up. I can't even remember the tackle's name, which, somebody told me, oh, no, he could actually end up playing.
Kennard?
Guy from Kentucky?
Yeah, Darian Kennard.
Leave me alone.
You've already forgot his name?
Is there a reason to remember it? Darian Kennard, and then and Sky Moore. Like if you had 5 picks and 3 of them were those guys, nobody's celebrating that draft. But when you end up with 10 picks and you get McDuffie, Karlaftis, Brian Cook, Leo Chenal, Josh Williams, Jalen Watson, Isaiah Pacheco around him, that's what makes that thing a good draft. And I think that's where they need to go here with L'Jarius Sneed, is to get more bites of the apple on the draft, because I don't think they have enough. I mean, I think they're going to constantly be in replacement mode just because of the big contracts, particularly if they are going to keep Chris Jones. Then this is going to look a lot more like 22, where you're going to have a position group where there's a ton of rookies, whether it's, 2 drafted and 1 undrafted wide receiver in that mix, whether it's a bunch of, drafted defensive linemen. Like, this looks like how they're going to replenish from all the, free agents they're going to lose is going to have to be with draft picks. Right now, they don't really have that many.
Yeah. And that's really the mark of a team, that if you're going to sustain what they've been doing over time, it's going to be the draft picks that make it happen. I know everybody gets excited about free agency and the opportunities. I think someone wrote about Mike Evans not coming here, that being a sad day, but it's like the reality of it is, if you're going to do what they've been doing, it's going to be having drafts like they had 2 years ago. It's going to have to be re-signing those kinds of players, because there's good players coming up that have to be re-signed. Or if they want to keep them, like Nick Bolton, like Creed Humphrey, Trent McDuffie down the road. L'Jarius Sneed, as much as I like him at 27 years old, reality is, in a knee that is a little bit shaky, depending on who you talk to, you probably got 2 to 3 good years left with him. And so it's better to sell high than it is to pay a price for holding on to a guy that you want to keep because you want to go for a 3-peat.
Yeah. What about this? I don't think it's going to happen, but just let's entertain it. Pittman for Sneed. I think it's kind of thing.
It doesn't really work that way, does it?
Not normally. Not normally, but,
I've never seen that happen in the NFL. Yeah.
Hey, I like this guy, so give him to me. Just usually isn't the best GM speak. Yeah. For how to make things work there.
Petro's fantasy league, it works that way, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Terry says, common sense says, let Chris Jones walk. I don't know. I was kind of surprised. I'm going to do some more digging on it. We touched on it a little bit today. There is a lot of guys who've been 30 plus and had 10 sack years. I was surprised at how many guys were popping up there. Now, I don't know if there's anybody. Aaron Donald is doing it right now in the league. Michael Strahan, Kevin Green, like Hall of Fame guys are still doing it into their 30s. The question is Chris Jones a Hall of Fame guy? Let's talk about his part of the equation. If you want to keep him in the mix, I'm a big believer in 27's the cutoff point for DB. So at 28, I'm all for getting draft picks for L'Jarius Sneed if you can get it done. That's just playing the math, Eric. I know how you like the math. But Chris Jones, does he strike you as a guy that's Michael Strahan, one of those guys, and you can expect, certainly more injury risk the older you get, but at 30, 31, 32, double-digit type sacks?
I think so. Like when he came into the league, right? We didn't think of him as the player he is now. He was a 600 snap guy, a 8 starts, 7 starts, 10 start guy. A lot of sacks. He had the 15 and a half in 2018, I want to say, but he wasn't. And then all of a sudden now he's become a guy that's playing 1,000 snaps a season on both sides. He's not a great run defender, but he's there he's the leader of this defense, and he has never really been hurt. He's missed a few games early in his career, but over the last few years, he's never really missed games because of injury. And I do think that, when you think about the Calais Campbells of the world, you think about the DeForest Buckners of the world, like those guys with those body types, they age pretty well.
Yeah. What do you think of Jones' longevity chances, Jeff?
There's a chance that he plays at a high level. I mean, the guys you're talking about that Eric just named, they've moved around for a reason. Usually they cost a lot of money, and they're trying to keep that money train going. And that's the thing with Chris Jones. It's not so much about will he produce, it's what's it going to cost? And you're willing to really invest and take that risk. And so I kind of chuckle when I hear some of the reports about growing optimism and the numbers being thrown around, $27, $28 million a year. Those are the same numbers as last year. And so I'm assuming that that's coming from the Chiefs side of this. And I always caution people, I've talked to people about this. Usually if you're hearing a lot about a negotiation when it comes to this kind of stuff, it's usually coming from the team. Like when the agents start talking about what they want, you'd be shocked at how different the numbers are. This was a deal that was where it could be done right now. I think it'd be done. It would have been done last year. And so I'm not super optimistic about it getting done. I think there's I think it's a PR campaign with the Chiefs trying to make it clear that they're trying to re-sign him, that they like him, much like what's happening with Minnesota and Kirk Cousins. We love you. We want you to be here. We want to give you everything you want. But when it comes to the dollars, I guarantee you Brett Veach has a number that he's not going beyond. And he's smart to not do it because Chris Jones is going to be a guy who can command. Once we get to the official tampering period next Monday, I promise you he will have 3 to 4 offers at least that are talking about $90 million in guaranteed money. I promise you the Chiefs are not going to be one of those teams offering that.
So what's your percentage that he's back in Kansas City?
2%.
Wow. Eric, what's your percent?
Chris, 2%?
Yeah.
I would multiply that by 25.
So 50%. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
you got to talk over those of us that aren't as sharp on the math. No, don't make it a quiz.
Yeah.
Just lay it on us, man.
I think that this team, when they've prioritized players, have gotten their players, right?
And who have they done that with?
Jones, right now.
But who have they done that with? That's the whole point.
Jones once.
Jones once.
And they had the franchise tag on him, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They had the leverage. He couldn't just walk out the door. My point with him is that he's done this twice now, where it's gone up to the last minute, where he's wanted every last nickel he could get. And last year was a full-on holdout. You're telling me that he's going to sign a deal knowing that come Monday he can talk to anybody he wants and see what's out there? Yeah, I think a deal gets done if he gets what he wants before that point. But I don't see them giving him what they want before that point. He's worked too hard to get to this place.
Brad points out Tyreek Hill. They did get Tyreek Hill re-signed. It was in the midst.
Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce.
He took a discount. Talking about guys who wanted. Both those guys were in situations where they couldn't get top dollar. He wants to reset the market.
I love this. I don't even understand why this is a topic.
I agree with that.
Like
50% is like. You're drinking the Kool-Aid here, thinking that why would he not test the market?
Well, I think he's going to. I think the question is, I think if you're right that he's going to get several offers that in the 30+ range, then there's going to be a bit of a bidding war. They're going to give him more guaranteed money than the Chiefs would be smart to give him. I think that should happen. I think teams like the Bears, anyone who's general manager or head coach thinks their job is in peril and has cap room, should be looking for this kind of guy. If you don't have the quarterback, that can carry everybody, then you've got to be excellent around him. And so, you know, if you've got the cap room and you've got a good young roster and you can bring this guy in to be the final piece of the puzzle, I think it's a great decision, right? For them to do it. If you're desperate to save your job and or get to a Super Bowl, like if, you know, Buffalo could carve out a way. I know they can't, but if they could, it would be worth it, right? Like, but I think the question is for the Chiefs, I don't think it's worth it. And I am kind of perplexed. I think it's going to be interesting. You know, right now, you know, there's things that are leaking out. You don't know if they're smoke screens or what they are. Somebody might have good hard information on it. I don't have good hard information on it. I'll be honest about that. But I think a year from now, I'll hear a story about how this played out and was there a game? Was it to drive up the price? Did we know the Raiders were going to be all over him and we're playing it like you got to come get him? Or was it that like, we don't think the market's there. Let Chris take a lap around the league. And when he gets, hey, you're 30, 24, 23, 25, 24, does that open up an opportunity for him to come back? I think we'll hear that on down the road, but I don't know what it is. Eric, you attended, I mean, if you're at 50, and I would be at 50 just because I don't know. I'm kind of like Jeff in the sense that for me, I would be moving on. So I don't understand why the dance continues, although I just tried to give you a scenario I have mine. Why are you so bullish at 50?
Well, let's look at the evidence. Like, they have always prioritized they've always at least given the premium players on their team the opportunity. Even Tyreek Hill was given the opportunity to stay before the price tag, the Christian Kirk contract moved the whole thing out, right? They've almost always given the premium position players on their team an opportunity to stay. But then putting the franchise tag on Sneed, to me, is like, that's the player they want to move. Jones is the player. Like, and there's also, and I know 2 years ago we all joked about like DiCaprio Boodle being like the only corner on the roster. So they certainly have gone into, you know, the draft and stuff without depth. But where are there, like Turk Wharton, is he going to get a second NFL contract? Is Derek Nottie coming back? And I know they drafted some guys late last year, but I mean, if they roll out the ball, they'll be fine at corner. They don't have an NFL caliber starting three technique on their team. So I think that part of it is just, this is a particular place where, much like 2021, this is a need in addition to a cornerstone player on the team.
That is a great point because, Jeff, one of the things we want to talk about, by the way, we're proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and yes, every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lots. Jeff, that is one of the angles. I mean, what does the defense look like without them? And Eric is right. I mean, with Derek Nottie gone, Tershawn Wharton gone, Charles Omenihu hurt, if you want to play him inside, pretty thin at D tackle if there's no Chris Jones. Is this we really don't want to do it, but we got to do it play, which is, I think there's always another way to go. Or is it, hey, you know, Christian Wilkins is going to be out there. You know, there are some other options, and we can give Christian Wilkins $22 million and we'll scheme around that as opposed to giving 30 to Chris Jones.
I think that's the way you have to think about it. I think it's, I don't want to say it's overly simplistic, but it's not really a Chris Jones or we don't get to win another Super Bowl conversation. You know, it's a Chris Jones, or do we go improve the receiving room? Chris Jones, do we go find a way to find a better option at left tackle? Or Chris Jones, you know, there's other things running back. There's other things this team needs to address. That if you get into this world where you're talking about, and again, I guess I want to make it clear. I think if he's back, they're a better defense. The question is, what are they a year from now or a year after that? You know, and really, what are they in terms of making moves in this offseason? It's if you're talking about L'Jarius Sneed, say worst case scenario, L'Jarius Sneed's trade market dries up and he's on that franchise tag until what, July. And so that's $20 million are tied up that you can't use to go aggressively pursue other people. Chris Jones, any deal he does, what makes it complicated is that it's going to be a lot of money. You can't spread the money out in the same way you would a younger player, right?
Mhm.
And so any deal he's doing, it's probably going to be a 25 million plus hit to your cap as well. I don't care how much you want to rework Patrick Mahomes' contract. At some point, the money dries up and you have to make tough choices somewhere else. And so if I'm Brett Veach, again, I'm thinking of it more, I'd like to have some flexibility and be able to build this team out over the next couple of years, as opposed to sticking with the idea that we need to have Chris Jones here. If you want Chris Jones here, pay him what he wants. If you don't, then move forward, as someone said, and use the cash somewhere else.
What's it look like without him? Without both of them, Eric. What are you doing together?
Yeah, I mean, part of me looks at the week 1 game against the Lions and says, we all thought that the sky was falling that day. And, that was when Sneed was injured, coming off of an injury in camp, and there was no Chris Jones. And I think that the defense held up admirably. I think if they have a whole offseason to plan for not having Jones and Sneed, it's going to be better than we think. But they're not going to be the second-rate defense in the NFL without those two. Jones Jones was phenomenal the last few years at closing out games, and Sneed was, really good compliment to Trent McDuffie. I just don't see. I think this team's a top 10 defense without the two. I can't see them being a top 5.
But they need to be a top 2 defense this year because the offense wasn't as good. If the offense gets better, you don't need them to be as good defensively.
Yeah, the 2019 Chiefs team was 7th in scoring defense, and that was more than enough. To your point, Jeff, if they go out and get a receiver or two and they draft a young guy, somebody brought up Chris Jenkins' son, Chris Jenkins, that's if they build through the trenches like that could be a thing where they've, done a really good job at defensive end. I think now starting to build defensive tackle. I think the big problem is in the last few drafts with the Chiefs, they've gotten really lucky is the wrong word, but they've drafted for need more than some teams, and they've hit. I would prefer this team as a fan not to have to draft for need and to have drafted Chris Jones as replacement ahead of time, and they haven't yet. And that's where I get the heebie-jeebies a little bit about them moving on from Jones. It's I think in a perfect world they would have drafted him by now.
By the way, where's Soren stand on this? Because he got our percentages but didn't provide one of his own.
Well, where do I stand on it? I wouldn't do it. I would not sign him. Listen, he wouldn't still be here. You might not have 3 rings if I ran the show, because I would have traded him 4 years ago. I'd always be moving on guys, right? Like the quarterback's the only guy I'm keeping in place. A left tackle I would keep in place. Everybody else I'm turning and burning. So I would be taking the 3rd round pick. So when I look at it, that's what I would do. That doesn't mean that's what they're going to do. And I think it is a very good point. I bump up. So my reasoning would say, just like you, Jeff, 2%. I'm not hearing anything. No. Not even any rumblings, which makes me think they're working on something, right? That's what's usually going on, which makes me think that something is being worked about right now, being worked on. But, I mean, you are looking at, if you lined up to play at 8, Neil Farrell and Matt Dickerson starting at defensive tackle for this team. That's a scary proposition. Not a lot of draft picks. I think they can do it. I think, the scary thing is Christian Wilkins is kind of shockingly old, right? He's not even that much younger than Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Now, Christian Wilkins at 22 million and Chris Jones at 28. DJ Reader, older, injuries. There are some guys out there. I put it more at about 35% that he's back. I'm kind of in between you two. My logic says Jeff's nailed it, 2%. He's got to take a giant hometown discount. But the lack of hearing anything makes me think that Eric's onto something, that they're trying.
Oh, I think they're totally trying. I just think the other side of it is, what does he want? What does agent want, right?
Yeah. I mean, has he changed?
That's the question.
Right? At the parade, seemed like he changed. He's going to be.
That's 20 Corona lights in.
I do agree. Like, that's what I can't figure out.
Yeah.
Was he just play into the crowd, or was there, is it like, look, we're already, 75% of the way done on a new deal. I don't know.
I think Chris Jones is the type of guy that he wants to be the nice guy. I think he wants to be pleasant with people. And I think that the way he handled that whole offseason holdout last year and sitting in the stand with his agents, I think that behind the scenes, when he gets away from the cameras and gets away from the team, those guys are in his ear saying, a lot of money out there. A lot of guys are locked up. All these guys taking franchise tag, that's more money for you. And so we didn't just go through all this last year just to say, oh, we'll just let that leverage go. Again, if the Chiefs give him what he wants, he'll sign. But do I believe they will give him what he wants and it will compare favorably to what is out there? I don't believe that. I don't see it happening.
It's going to be interesting for sure. We're going to be watching this very closely here moving ahead. Let's talk about Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Eric. We'll, of course, give you first shot. You're a giant fan of MVS, the player. Enjoyed all your conversations you had with him one-on-one for sure. You've chronicled some of those great chats with his unbelievable grasp of reality of what kind of player he is. How will we remember the MVS era here in Kansas City now that he's been released?
Okay, so one of my friends, my best friend, the best man at my wedding, messaged me, and he said, "Are you finally going to tell the truth about MVS and how bad he is?" And he's a Vikings fan. And I responded to him, and I looked up the data, and I said, "Sean, my friend Sean, I go, in the history of the Vikings franchise, there are two 100-yard conference championship games in the history of the Minnesota Vikings. Marquez Valdes-Scantling himself has 2. He has as many as that dog shit franchise has. So that encapsulates what MVS is, right? He was not a great signing. It didn't work out. And yet, kind of like Frank Clark, there were the good times. So I have a hard time being that hard on Veach for that move, given that they won all 7 playoff games he played in, and he had a hand in a fair amount of them. I actually wouldn't be surprised if he came back. I heard something funny at the combine about the Jets poking around at him, of course, because of Rodgers. and so, like, do you guys
bouncing back between 2 lovers? Huh?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're like, basically, like,
that's funny on so many levels.
Yeah,
like Rodgers' frustration with MVS dropping the ball in Green Bay.
Yeah,
well, let's go get McCole Hardman last year. We'll just grab a Chiefs guy and marry him up. That's funny. I like.
Yeah. Well, the best part is the best part is like, he probably could have taken a pay cut from the Chiefs. But there's a part of me that believes that he was like waiting out for the Jets to trade for him. And so he did. And then so he just gets cut because he's an idiot, because he's waiting for this trade that's never going to happen. But no, I feel like, look, he, especially in 2022, I felt like when you looked at the on-off splits, they were a better offense when he was on the field. He certainly stretched the defense. But then this year, the teams didn't respect him deep, and they shouldn't have. And that, I think, really hurt their offense. And even though he made some plays in the postseason, it's very clear that they have to look somewhere else for a deep threat. And I'm not sure if that, the Xavier Worthy's been mocked their way a bunch this week. That could be a solution, but they do have to find a deep threat. They cannot not have somebody go down the field. It just has to be somebody that Patrick likes throwing to, which he clearly doesn't like throwing to MVS, and somebody that's reliable when the ball is in the air.
Did he make almost $1 million a catch? It's actually not that far off. It's like,
no, it was like $500K a catch. It was a lot.
Listen, he's 29. He'll be 30 years old for the season. If the Jets sign him, I might buy a ticket to go to the Jets.
I would be surprised if anybody
make it happening. Yeah.
I would be surprised if anybody but Kansas City signed him. Yeah. I think Kansas City might sign him to like a 1-year veteran minimum deal. I just think there was so much delusion there that there was no way that they were going to get the pay cut, right? He should have just taken a pay cut because he's going to be more valuable to this team than anybody else. But I think at best it's going to be he's going to get a minimum contract with somebody because this year was atrocious for him.
Listen, he's clearly the Frank Clark of the offensive side of the ball. He came up big in big games. There's less wrong with this move, the MVS move, than there was with the Frank Clark move. And I know people like Frank because Frank was better at the mic and had some funny lines, and he was Chris Jones' buddy and, his wingman and all that. But like what they gave up for Frank Clark, I mean, could have been had they, not scored one of the touchdowns against the Niners the first time. If they come up short, don't come back from 10. If they don't make the field goal in 22, if they have no touchdowns right now, we are talking about how Frank Clark's massive contract and all the picks they gave up for him torpedoed the Chiefs. That if they had that to do over again, they could have been champions. They're champions 3 times, so nobody brings it up. But MBS was a much cheaper deal, just cost money, didn't have to give up draft picks, and like everybody has it. I know we chatted the other day with Bucky Brooks, and he's going to be on with us later on the 2D podcast, but take the top off the defense guy. Everybody's got one. The Chiefs went out and signed Donnie Avery when Andy Reid and John Dorsey first got here. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to run down the field fast and stretch the field. And he blocked when they ran the ball. I mean, was it a great trade? No. But was it part of an equation that added up? Yes. I mean, I think it should be remembered for what it was, serviceable.
Yeah, I think that people have to realize that if you're doing this right as a dynasty, there's a lot of people around the league who are going to have rings, who are going to come through the turnstile and go out the back door. They're not going to always be stars. Yeah, this thing started with a lot of stars. It started with Tyreek Hill and Kelsey and Kareem Hunt and, Justin Houston and, Eric Berry, Mark Speeders. But to sustain it over 5 years, 10 years, you got to say goodbye to a lot of people. And that's really hard for people to really grasp. And you have to accept that people who are coming in don't have to blow you away. They just have to do their part when they're asked. You got to maximize them, right? And so they maximized MVS. I don't sit here and say his contract was ridiculous. I mean, they got the most out of it that you could get out of him. The same thing is true of there's Kendall Fuller, whether it's Tyrann Mathieu, whether whoever it is, all these offensive linemen who cycled through. There's probably 20 guys in this league who are on their last legs right now who have rings on their fingers because they came here and it worked. They were the right fit for here. McCole Hardman, another guy. So it's like, I think that's going to be his legacy. He's going to represent the kind of players they have to come through here to keep winning championships.
Now, the good news is you can find that kind of production.
Exactly. It's
for
cheap.
A lot less.
Very cheap.
You don't have to.
Noah Gray had 10 more catches than MVS did this year.
Yeah.
By the way,
what were people expecting from him though when he showed up here?
Well,
that's my thing. He was never great.
No. Eric and I were expecting
Eric bought
but
in.
in Green Bay,
I bought in as well.
But in Green Bay,
Eric didn't sell when it was down 20%. I did. After year one, I'm like, I'm out on this thing. He rode it all the way, all the way to the ground.
2 Super Bowls, 200-yard games and conference title games. Both are more than half of these franchises in the NFL have.
You were talking
all
about
together.
like, Jeff, has anybody ever just been trying to justify their own prediction?
Yeah. He was.
Because
he did an interview with him like 4 years ago, and he knew some math. He knew some algebra.
But no,
he knew what algorithm
he had a quantifiable effect on how open Devontae Adams was. He had a quantifiable effect. Like when you look at the data, and he did have exactly what they were looking for.
All right, I'm calling off the jam. Enough MVS, right? Like we're gonna do it.
I brought it up. I said my piece. I said he was bad, but he had great moments. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
You're 100% right.
He had 7 great moments.
He's gonna be one of my
favorites. The catch against the Ravens.
Yeah.
How many of the fans in the chat here, when they saw number 11 camping under that ball, were like, "Oh shit"? That's the beauty of this whole thing.
The dog shines. The sun shines on a dog's ass every once in a while.
That's the way you throw a football to a 5-year-old kid.
Tommy Moe.
Like a Nerf ball.
Tommy Moe.
Here you go, son.
MVS had a 100-yard receiving game for the Packers against the Bucks in 2020. Tommy Moe, stay being wrong every time you talk. Way to go. Anyway.
He only had one, or
he had one for the Chiefs and one for the Packers.
One for the Packers. Okay, I see. All right.
2020. Good job, Tommy Moe.
You know, by the way, can I draw attention to this? Just he says, "Bruh, it's no Gary retiring." This speaks to how the social media works. Curtis has a guy he interacts with. Curtis Siebold, who works with me and does the voiceover here, has a guy who did a funny of like Noah Gray retiring, and then had a Mike Florio, because Mike Florio, I guess, was catching a lot of heat today. Had a Mike Florio video of him saying, "Oh, we've got a lot of sources saying that he's gonna, they're preparing for him to call it quits." I think it was his thing he said about Andy Reid, and that is now taking on traction like it's a real thing. It's not a real thing. Noah Gray's not retiring. So
Mike Florio would never mention Noah Gray's name for any reason.
Let's talk about what to do with the wideout position, because T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, we knew we're all going to get kept. They got kept. Colts making it official today, I guess, on Pittman. But Mike Evans got pulled back. There was some hope. Eric, you were talking that you thought the Chiefs were at least, kicking the tires on that. I think when L'Jarius Sneed got the tag, that was probably gone. That's probably about the time that really got done. But when you do look at it, if they line up and play ball today, Rashee Rice, Justin Watson, and take your pick, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney are your three top wide receivers. What is the plan at wideout, Jeff?
I would assume, again, how this free agency thing plays out, we're going to have a lot more clarity next week about what's going to happen with Chris Jones. There'll be money available for that, which would allow them to pursue some of those second-tier options. I think it's a lot like what it was a couple of years ago when they brought in MVS and brought in Juju and drafted a guy. I would expect them to draft a player. There should be a lot of decent options. It's a receiver risk draft, so there should be options there they can go after. And then you're talking about looking at the guys like Darnell Mooney, Marquise Brown. I've been saying Marquez for so long. I got to make sure I'm saying it right. Marquise Brown is a guy who's interesting because of his speed. Gabe Davis' name has been thrown around out there. He seems like a bigger version of Sammy Watkins or MBS. But, he's in that second tier. Josh Reynolds is another guy. I think they're going to be looking in that bin to see what they can find. But I think easily you're talking about at least a couple more guys coming in here to add to that room with Rashee Rice.
I'll say this. The longer I look at, the depth chart now that it starts taking the guys off there, like the idea of like going all in on Jones or Jones and Sneed to like go back. Like no, you can't get there.
Thank you.
Like, no, please, no, don't do that, because, we talk about how thin they are at D-tackle. I mean, Chris Jones would be the only one, right? You got to line up and have somebody play. You got to have some guys at linebacker. I mean, come on, we're killing Jeff here with this conversation right now. He's really joking. But how about it, Eric? I mean, what is the path back at wide receiver now?
Yeah, I mean, I bring up Josh Reynolds' name a couple times because they went after him a couple years ago. I know he had a couple big drops in the NFC Championship game, but he's been pretty good for Detroit. He's a good complementary player, can play kind of both inside, outside, and they did that with Juju, right? They went after Juju, kind of turned them down, went after him again, brought him in the fold. I think that could be a player. Now, he's not a burner, but he's a 4.52 guy, but he's pretty good there. Marquise Brown's one where if the Chiefs really look, I agree with Jeff. If they don't go after Jones, they could go give Marquise Brown $15 million a year, and I think that is one of the things they could do to surprise all of us on the 50% of the time they don't bring Jones back. A guy like DJ Chark is somebody who has kind of the same, deep ball kind of stuff, but he's been a disappointment since he left Jacksonville. There's guys like that. Gabe Davis, to me, is one that's intriguing because we always say these things about Mahomes. He's not a contested ball thrower. He tries to engineer open throws. And yet every single year, Patrick Mahomes develops something new in his game. And so if they brought in Gabe Davis, it would change who Patrick Mahomes was. He'd have to throw to guys who are covered. And maybe that's something that he's willing to change. But the guys like Davis, even the guys like Evans, I understood why they would go after Evans, but he's truly a different receiver than Patrick's used to. And so that's why I don't see Davis. I see more of the Charks. I see more of the Reynolds. And I see, at the very high end, the Marquise Brown, who's very much an Andy Reid type receiver.
If you can go out and get DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault,
Mooney's another good name. I like Mooney as a good
Mooney,
name.
Reynolds. If you can go get three of those guys for $3 million, that's the same price you paid for Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and I think you're a better team, right?
Well, aren't you always the one, Soren, saying make 15 happy?
Yes.
Very happy.
But I don't see the name in free agency that can make him happy.
Yeah.
Right. I think you draft another one in the second round,
and
you sign some veterans, and
you know what makes him happy?
Rice.
Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, you stay over there. Anybody else comes out here with me, I'm good. You other guy, you stay. That would make him really happy.
The more I look at, by the way, we're proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they're not a problem if you know Gann. They've been making them disappear since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your lot. Get a restripe today. I'll tell you what, I parked the other night at a restaurant where I had no idea I was parking in a handicapped spot until I got out and walked. There was a sign across the sidewalk on the wall, and I'm like, wait a minute, because they didn't have it marked on the ground, and it pissed me off, and I won't be back there. So get Gann Asphalt and Concrete over there today. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but it would be nice to know how to get back in the car, drive, go find a new spot. It's annoying. Don't annoy your customers. Call Gann. GannAsphalt.com is where you can find them online, or call 816-484-3338. The more I look at the left tackle spot, I think they can get one in the draft. If they're not going to get one in the draft, then I think Donovan Smith should be back. I don't see a better option unless he's like, I need more money. Like, what's the future at left tackle look like, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, unless they want to go like turbo Brett Veach and go after like Andre Dillard, who was terrible in Tennessee after being terrible in Philly, that like a younger guy who's, has pedigree coming out that they want to like buy low on. I think it is a veteran guy, and Donovan Smith was kind of the perfect embodiment of that last year. I think that they, much like Charles Leno just retired, right? I sort of think of it as like back in the day when the Bears had Jermon Bushrod and Charles Leno, and eventually they kind of just let Charles Leno win that job as a 7th round young guy. Now, Wanya Morris is drafted a little higher, but don't you guys see kind of if they can't get a top end player, which when we talked to Bucky Brooks, when we taped a little bit earlier, it was like the wide receiver thing might push some good tackles back to them, which is a good thing. If they can't get a tackle in the draft, I think they go back to Donovan Smith and kind of see if Wanya Morris can take the job from him. I think that's the best opportunity if it doesn't work out in the draft.
Who? Let's have a show of hands here. Wanya Morris starts 15 games in one NFL season at any point in his career. Put your hand up.
I'm going to go with up.
Really?
Yeah.
At guard, when they let Trey Smith walk, because they are letting Trey Smith walk.
Yeah, let's flash back to your Darian Kennard comment too, because I heard that same thing about Kennard. I'm more optimistic about Wanya Morris than Kennard. I watched Kennard play in camp, and I was like, SEC Offensive Lineman of the Year, that league sucks. Like if that was the case, I don't know what that is. Wanya Morris has got a lot more to him than that. But
you don't think he can play left tackle, right?
I don't think he can play left tackle. Guard, right side. Maybe the idea is, Donovan Smith was the holdover, and they're going to flip-flop him and Jawan Taylor. And it's like, let Jawan get comfortable with the system. They kind of talked about it. Let's see what happens in the draft. I think tackle in the draft, offensive tackle in the first round of the draft makes sense. And I think moving, Sneed for as many picks as possible gives them ammunition to move up and get one of the guys they really want to get.
See, here's what I don't understand is why this continues to be a bugaboo position for Brett Veach to solve, because he's been really good at every other spot generally when it comes to drafting, but tackle. Now, I don't know if it's a lack of patience or it's a lack of evaluation, but it feels like every year we're having this conversation about these guys they bring in who nobody wants to even give a shot to be on the field for longer than like 25 downs.
Isn't that just, Jeff, isn't that just by virtue of now you can come back and say, well, Karlaftis works, and it's true about edge too, but like if you want a premium left tackle in the NFL, you've got to take him in the first 12 picks of the draft, first 15 picks, and they're simply never in that position.
Or you have to recognize it. By the way, something I had a conversation with about, you have to recognize it when Trent Williams is available.
And they went after Trent Williams.
No, they didn't when he was a trade. They didn't when he was, and it drove me that crap. Like, well, we're happy with our tackles. And 10 minutes later, they were both hurt. And so they didn't. They swung and missed.
True.
He was available for pocket change when he was shooting his way out of Washington. And they're Mr. We'll take any bad seed and try to make him work. If you could bring Kadarius Toney in, you should have been all over getting Trent Williams. All right. So
they did try for Trent Williams the year they signed Toney. It just the Niners outbid them.
They did.
Yeah.
Let me say this, Jeff. I think the answer is to what Eric said. You got to draft him. And who was the last guy that hit the market at age 26 who had started every game and was playing at a Pro Bowl level and just played for a dumbass team that didn't know what they were doing since Mitchell Schwartz did after the 15 season? Like,
but that's right tackle too.
Right
like
tackle, yeah.
I know, but any tackle. Look at the whole. Look at right tackle now. Like, you don't even see. There's like four guys that are under 27. Almost all of them are. Anyone who's a left tackle, Tyron Smith, Donovan, they're all 30 plus. I think Mitchell Schwartz and what the Chiefs did with him was a slap in the face. And Trent Williams changing teams and going to San Francisco. Those two moves are the last two times quality tackles change teams. It just doesn't happen anymore.
If you look at the top paid tackles left tackles in the NFL, Laramie Tunsil is a trade. Andrew Thomas, a draft pick. Trent Williams, a trade. David Bakhtiari, a draft pick. Ronnie Stanley, a draft pick. Jake Matthews, drafted by my boss. Colton Miller, draft
Bakhtiari
pick.
wasn't a first round pick, though.
Yeah, but they're all draft picks, right?
Yeah.
They're like the highest paid left tackle who was ever available in free agency is Orlando Brown in the NFL right now. Teron Armstead also, but he had the injury stuff. Everybody, when you go down this list, Andre Dillard, guys, is the 18th or 18th-ish highest paid left tackle in all of football, and he sucks. He was let go because he got beat out by someone named Jordan Mailata, who's much better than him, and he went to Tennessee he made $10 million last year.
Yeah. I'm not arguing with you. Those are all pertinent facts. I'm just saying that at some point they're going to have to play a guy that they don't fully know what he is and try to live with it and try to figure out if he can play or not.
And I think that's this year.
The fact that they're win now, like back when the Orlando Brown thing was happening, I was, I asked around and I was like, and it's like, Eric, after the first 4 or 5 guys, none of these guys are ready to play. And that was in the, Andrew Thomas in year 1 was terrible. Evan Neal, first 2 years, bad. Most of these guys,
Eric Fisher was bad.
Most of these guys' age curves dip before they come up. It's not like it's a double whammy where you have to spend significant draft capital to get these guys. Andrew Thomas was the 4th pick in the draft. You have to spend significant draft capital to get these guys. And they take most of them, other than like Tristan Wirfs and Christian Darrisaw, they take like 2 years to develop. So if you're a Chiefs team and you're trying to win a Super Bowl every year, and your proposition is to move up to take a guy who's going to suck as a rookie, that's always been their hang up, right?
I think this year and the success they had with Donovan Smith, and I think Andy Reid's game plan at Philly was go get 2 premium tackles. His game plan in Kansas City was go get 2 premium tackles. And now everybody's read that playbook and they don't let him get out there. But he has just succeeded with Orlando Brown, who's not that good. He's not that bad, but he's not that good either. And Donovan Smith, who's kind of old and kind of top heavy and kind of pushy and grabby and penalty-ish, I think he's figured it out. Like when you had Donovan McNabb and you had Alex Smith, they're fine quarterbacks. They're very good quarterbacks. By the way, Donovan McNabb might weigh 295 pounds now. He is giant. Lifting, his forearms look like legs. Yeah. Did you see him at the? We haven't talked.
I don't know. I hung out with Jeff in the comment, and Jeff's
interviewed him.
Biceps made me feel less manly than I normally feel.
I interviewed him at the Super Bowl, and I'm like, "Did you eat John Randall? What happened here? He's immense." Anyway, but
two Vikings legends, by the way, John Randall and Donovan McNabb.
Yeah. So that he's been forced to adapt. And I think now is when they go, okay, we'll find the longest arm guy there at 32, or if we can move up to 22 and get a guy we really like. And he may not be, Lane Johnson or, whoever you want to put, but he'll be good enough for us to do it. I think, Jeff, you're right. I think they answer that long-term answer this year. They didn't like anybody 2 years ago because they were all short-arm tackles. And by the way, none of them are playing left tackle now in the league. That's why they traded for Orlando Brown. I think this time there are enough guys. Somebody's coming to the Chiefs. I think I'll be surprised if the first round pick isn't a left tackle.
I'm with that.
Any reaction to? Let's finish with this real quick. Missouri Governor Mike Parsons commuting the sentence of Britt Reid. Jeff, I know Vahe Gregorian of the Kansas City Star wrote a piece. This was the classic Friday news dump. 4:35, 5:30. I can't remember what time, but late in the day on Friday, this news came out. Do you have a reaction?
It's horrible, and it's not even Chief story. It's a justice story. It's a humanity story. I'm with Vahe. It's like, if you want to do that, if you're Mike Parsons, come out, have a press conference, take questions about it. Don't put out a lame ass statement. Don't act like you're not doing this because you're a big Chiefs fan and you think it's going to play well with your constituents. Like the 5-year-old girl who's now 8 years old, was almost killed. Life has changed forever. Mother obviously traumatized by this, and you're acting like it's like not that big a deal. I think it's heinous. It's. I don't want to get too deep down the road here, the rabbit hole, but it's like, as a Black person, this goes back to like the 50s and the 40s when crimes would happen to Black people and people would not be punished. There'd be no justice. And people would walk out of jail, they wouldn't get prosecuted. And this is kind of, it harkens back to those kinds of days. Like, the guy was tone deaf when he made the decision. I don't think it's an Andy Reid thing. It's about justice, and justice was not done.
I don't know why we have courts now if the politicians are just going to erase what the courts are. Like the whole politics.
Well, especially when the courts are also in that, like, the courts already put their thumb on the scale. So this was one where the courts didn't and the politician did. And like that, I mean,
although I do want to be fair. I do want to be fair here because Todd Lebo covered the story for us on 810. And Todd talked to a lot of people about it. And he said the sentence Britt Reid got was on the harsh end. Like people were surprised. Like, no favors were done on the 3-year sentence. But he got the 3-year sentence. And, so now to back, like, I don't think anybody goes for damage done. Oh, wow. Geez, he's way overpaying there. Okay. Because they usually give a sentence that's too soft in a situation like this. The fact that one came down it's a terrible look. And the other thing is, it's not just Parsons not answering. The timing, it seems, I find it impossible to believe that there weren't conversations with either Andy Reid or the Chiefs, because Andy Reid talked last week, 2 days before this happened at the Combine, and now will not be heard from for like 2 months until they get to, or maybe 3 months, 2 months, when they get to OTAs. And when it gets brought up, he's going to be pissed off at whoever brings it up, and it'll be the first chance anybody has to ask him a question. It's not good.
No. Well, the thing about football is, and we said this with the DeMar Hamlin thing last year, it's like football is a very tenuous, like, football is our entertainment, it's our escape, it's all of these things. And that's true about politicians too. And my issue is, if you are in a position of power, you have to make sure that football is in the correct place in society, or else this whole thing comes tumbling down, right? To elevate, the stature of somebody connected to football sends a bad message. And for a lot of the reasons Jeff said, right? Where, again, we it has become in some ways our national religion, even though it isn't and shouldn't be. And we have to make sure that it doesn't actually have that kind of impact.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. Listen, we're always brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized. Every project comes with a written warranty. They've been solving parking lot problems since 1994. Don't upset your customers. Don't upset me with a lot that I can't see the handicap spots. Make sure it's brightly, displayed right there for everyone to see. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best. Been solving those problems since 1994. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.